Before I introduce our special guest address, we'll take a moment to hear from our sponsor, Syngenta.
We rise before dawn. We prepare for the day ahead. We approach each day with determination to conquer what we can and prepare for what we can't. We work hard while finding ways to work smarter. We problem solve, seeking new solutions to the challenges we face. While our routines may look a little different, our roots are the same. We all take to our work with a sense of collective pride, united in our shared goal to persevere, to progress, and to prosper. Because together we are stronger. Together we build a better future. Together we rise.
It's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Julie Callahan for our special guest address today. As the Assistant U.S. Trade Representative for Agricultural Affairs and Commodity Policy, Dr. Callahan leads efforts to advance the interests of U.S. farmers, ranchers, and food manufacturers on the global stage. With a distinguished career spanning USTR, the FDA, and USDA, she has played a key role in shaping agricultural trade policy, negotiating free trade agreements, and tackling barriers to U.S. exports, and will give us a snapshot of the state of the U.S. agricultural trade. Welcome, Dr. Callahan.
Well, thank you very much, and I'd like to first thank Agri-Pulse for extending the invitation to be here with you today. It's really an honor to be here with you, and I have to say taxes, trade, and technology are all fascinating topics, and I know you've already had an excellent lineup all day, and hopefully I'll be able to share some new perspective and kind of a different take from inside the administration. So really happy to be able to share kind of what I'm seeing from the USTR side. And thanks for that great introduction. I guess now you know a little about me. I've been in the office of the U.S. Trade Representative since the end of the Obama administration, so seen quite a lot from inside USTR. And my whole career really I've spent in international policy, whether inside and outside of government. And this is my 6th administration, so started, as you know, at USDA, moved into FDA. So it's really been a fascinating exploration of U.S. international trade policy and trade policy. So for those unfamiliar with USTR itself, as an organization, we're incredibly lean. My staff, the Agriculture Office, is comprised of 10 people. I know a lot of people are surprised to hear we only have 10 people. We're like 10 squared, I think, in the amount of output that we have. But we cover all issues affecting U.S. agriculture, and that includes negotiating the agriculture provisions in trade agreements. We also look at specific trade concerns. So that's when anything moves from a discrete issue that maybe USDA, FAS would be covering from their post, when it becomes a systemic issue, or when it becomes a really intractable issue that our regulators are not able to resolve on their own. I always say if a regulator calls me, I know it's bad news because the ball is going to be put into USTR's court to resolve something that's really a systemic challenge that affects the ability of U.S. ag producers from accessing different markets. Also, prior to launching any negotiation, we consult with 19 executive branch agencies and make sure we have a consolidated U.S. position. The trade positions aren't just USTR, but take into account all of the perspectives from the interagency. And we also consult with Congress and, of course, with our ag stakeholders, and that includes the Agricultural Policy Advisory Committee and the Agricultural Technical Advisory Committees that provide advice to the USTR and the Secretary of Ag on all of our negotiations and our important trade initiatives. Additionally, if that's not enough, we lead the work in 2 WTO committees, the World Trade Organization. We cover one committee that is focused on regulatory issues, food safety, plant health, and animal health. That's the SPS committee, and also the Committee on Agriculture. We also take a look at domestic regulations to make sure we're being consistent with our international obligations, and also weigh in on other international organizations where ag issues come up. So it really is a full slate that we cover with our 10 very hardworking people. So from this perch, I can really tell you not a day goes by where one country or another isn't doing something incredibly irritating that's making market access more difficult. And so we're really on the front lines, pushing back on these unjustified trade barriers to do what we can every day for U.S. agriculture. And so today, being lovely St. Patrick's Day afternoon on a beautiful day, we are exactly 8 weeks from Inauguration Day. I know for some of us it seems so much longer than 8 weeks. It's been an action-packed 8 weeks. And one observation that I'd like to share with you regarding the administration is that from day one, there has been such a focus and a vision on the America First trade policy and the president's trade agenda. Across the new administration, it's been sort of a single-minded focus. And I think all of us in the room can also appreciate this is really an administration of action, and the speed and intensity of creating and implementing massive changes, really changing up the status quo of trade policy, has really been amazing in many of the items that are rolling out, executive orders, presidential memos. It's really this action-oriented administration that's creating a very lively environment at USTR. Many of you probably saw Ambassador Greer's Senate confirmation hearing. And during that hearing, he mentioned that U.S. farmers can compete in all markets, whether domestic, around the world, as long as there's a level playing field. And that is really the focus. Keeping the playing field level requires constant attention. There's always this attempt to erode and create a more skewed playing field. So at USTR, every day we're pressing to open markets, and we're pressing to prevent bad things from happening that would erode our ability to keep that playing field level. And I'm sure many of you recognize that the last 4 years were really not the most aggressive in terms of opening market access. And a reset is really needed. And the trade data really says it all. If you take a look at, we had a 4-year pause in ag market access negotiations. In 2024, U.S. ag exports to the world were relatively stagnant compared to 2023. 2023 was $174 billion, 2024, $176 billion. However, if you look at ag imports from the world, there was a very large increase in imports. So the U.S. agricultural trade deficit with the world really shifted in a major way. From 2023, we had a $21 billion agricultural trade deficit. In 2024, that went up to $37 billion. And this was really part of a trend that started in 2021. That was the year that we shifted from an agricultural trade surplus to a deficit. And so in a matter of 3 years, we went from an agricultural trade surplus of $6 billion to an agricultural trade deficit of $37 billion just in 3 years' time. And of course, there were economic factors at play that fed into that shift, but from the USTR perspective, this really is not an okay trajectory, and we recognize this is not an okay path for U.S. agriculture to go down. And I'll just give you a few specifics. I won't belabor the point, but the US-EU trade deficit just in 1 year went from $20 billion in 2023 to $23.6 billion in 2024. And likewise, the deficit with Canada went from a little under 12 to a little under 13 billion. And with Mexico went from 17 billion to 18 billion. So these trends, I could name more countries, but I'll just stop with those three. And the trend also extends to countries where we take a look and see, we say, you know, it's not so bad. We have an ag trade surplus with these countries. But when you get into the data, with a lot of these countries, our surplus is actually shrinking over time. So if you look at the Philippines in 2024, we had a $2.2 billion trade surplus. So that looks pretty good until you think about 2023, where we had 2.6 billion. Vietnam, similar. We had 382 million surplus last year, but it's down from 800 million. So it's not all dark clouds, I'll say. There are some trading partners where we're really holding steady and doing well. I would say Japan is a great example. We had a $10.9 billion trade surplus last year, roughly holding steady from 2023. And this is really a testament to the US-Japan trade agreement that USTR negotiated and finalized during the first Trump administration. So I share all of this with you today to highlight first the trends that we need to consider and address in global agricultural trade, but also to re-emphasize the importance of negotiating market access and negotiating agreements with countries that are really going to provide tangible benefits for U.S. agriculture. And I have to say, now is really a new time at USTR. There is this injection of energy and enthusiasm. Just last week, the USTR asked me to fly to Manila after I provided a briefing on some draft measures that would be harmful for U.S. agriculture. And I'll say it's a very, very, very busy time at USTR. As you've all probably read in the news, there's a lot of deadlines coming up. But really the bottom line is, with our leadership, whatever it takes, we are ready to engage directly and face-to-face with our trading partners, regardless of if it's a convenient time or not. We are instructed we should get on a plane and make clear to the other country this is going to be an issue and we really need to resolve this. So that's really, I wanted to share how committed and enthusiastic our leadership is to really make tangible progress for U.S. ag. So shifting gears a little to kind of the official path forward, many of you, I'm sure, have read the America First Trade Policy Memorandum, which offers a real path forward, and it's really like a revolutionary reset of all of our trading relationships across the board. The administration is focused on restoring fairness and balance to U.S. trade relationships that have really become skewed over the past several years and decades. And it's led to a persistent global trade deficit, not just for ag, but across the board. So the America First trade policy seeks to promote investment and productivity, defend U.S. national security, and benefit American workers, manufacturers, farmers, ranchers, food manufacturers, all businesses across the United States. And through this memorandum, the President directed the USTR to lead a thorough, comprehensive analysis of our trade relationships and to coordinate with other U.S. government agencies to review trading practices and make recommendations consistent with the America First trade policy. So this includes evaluating and seeking to address non-reciprocal tariffs, as well as non-reciprocal non-tariff barriers in pursuit of increased market access for U.S. exports, including, of course, for food and agricultural products. And at this time, USTR is engaged in a number of activities. If you've read the memo, there's many, many boxes to check to fulfill this presidential memorandum. And so these include work related to the examination of U.S. bilateral trade deficits. And like I mentioned, we're looking at deficits, but we're also looking in trends where we have a surplus that may be shrinking and going in the wrong direction. We're also taking a fresh look at the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement, or USMCA, taking another look at the China Phase 1 agreement to see how that's working, and a whole host of other related trade issues. We're also taking a comprehensive review of unfair trade practices and a review of our existing trade agreements, whether those are working for us or not, and a consideration of new trade agreements. Are there issues that we could tackle through new kinds of negotiations? Not necessarily an FTA, but are there novel kinds of negotiations that we could launch to tackle very specific, discrete challenges that affect U.S. competitiveness? I will say the research and analysis in these areas is taking place as we speak, and it will contribute to an extensive report and a set of recommendations that are due to the President on April 1st. So time is ticking for myself and my colleagues on that. As many of you are aware, USTR opened a public comment period on unfair trade practices that closed last week on March 11th, and we're carefully reviewing all of the input that we received and really appreciate the extensive feedback that we received from the ag community. I think it was probably a cathartic exercise for a lot of people to have a laundry list of every unfair thing. And I will say it was kind of cathartic inside USTR also to just create that master list. We have the national trade estimate, the NTE report is, like an encyclopedia. But this was really a more tailored look at what are the key issues that are really impeding our ability to fully access different markets around the world, and how could we fix them? So the America First trade policy focuses on key areas. First, fair and reciprocal trade. That's really number one. Second, of course, increased market access for U.S. exports. The third is addressing unfair trade barriers. And finally, increasing the strength of the American economy through increased domestic production and increased wages. Now, some of the work as we're implementing this new trade policy will look very familiar to all of our ag stakeholders, in that we will still be hyper-focused on resolving trade irritants, resolving those trade barriers that are systemic issues that hamper our ability to access foreign markets. However, the course that the Trump administration has set is really geared toward a dramatic shift in the world trading order, not incrementally, but through a bold reset of looking at all of our trading relationships at the same time. For each trading partner, we're also taking a look at, are there tariff and non-tariff barriers that are blocking our market access for agriculture or creating a skewed playing field that disadvantages American farmers and ranchers? And then we're also looking at, how are they treating the United States compared to how we're treating them? And then how are they treating third countries compared to how they're treating us? And finally, looking at our FTA partners, are they really treating us fairly? Are they living up to their full commitments that we negotiated in that agreement? And then, like I said, are there new negotiations that could be pursued to rebalance the trading relationships? So this is really a wholesale, kind of a multi-dimensional puzzle with all of our trading partners that we're looking at all of these different angles to see, are the trading partners treating us fairly, and if not, how can we address that? Now, behind all of these questions and all of the analysis that's taking place at USTR is the understanding that the President intends to create leverage to make possible these sweeping changes that are really needed to ensure that U.S. farmers and ranchers are treated fairly. And I'm sure you've seen, the social media and the quotes in the press. The president really cares about ag quite a bit. And that's a great thing, because that really is coming into USTR with the message that ag market access is a major priority for this administration. Now, shifting gears a little, I would like to talk a bit about technology as well. And really, a key aspect of U.S. competitiveness in agriculture is the adoption of new technologies. And I'm not limiting this to agricultural biotechnology. That, of course, is incredibly important. But all new technologies, whether it's crop protection, veterinary medicines, taking a look at new genomic techniques, AI, across innovation, across platforms, across sectors. And U.S. productivity and efficiency is among the highest in the world because of U.S. preeminence in innovation. So the continued adoption of innovation really is a vital element of maintaining U.S. competitiveness. And it's also essential in ensuring agricultural sustainability. So optimizing pesticide use, optimizing fertilizer, ensuring profitability, ensuring that we can tackle new pest and disease pressures. All of these challenges faced in agriculture really deserve all of the innovation out there. And therefore, that's why this is a key area that USTR focuses on as well, including promoting the adoption by all of our trading partners of transparent, predictable, science and risk-based SPS approaches that are truly rooted in scientific evidence. Now, during the first Trump administration, we negotiated strong WTO plus commitments in the USMCA, including provisions on science and risk, a full SPS chapter that was WTO plus. And this is really what allowed USTR to successfully challenge Mexico's measures on biotech corn. The United States' successful challenge in this USMCA litigation not only protected billions of dollars of U.S. corn exports to Mexico, it was so much bigger than corn. It was really a defense of innovation. And the win was really an essential victory for the United States and a signal to the world of the importance of innovation, and that the United States was going to stand up for U.S. farmers' ability to use all of the latest technological advancements. Now, a number of trading partners are still opposing biotechnology more than 3 decades after these products have been proven completely safe. And they're really on the wrong side of history. New technologies are absolutely essential for improving efficiency and ensuring global food security. So we're continuing to impress on all of our trading partners the importance of looking at the evidence, looking at the data, approving these new valuable technologies that could benefit themselves as well as U.S. agriculture. So, of course, all of this kind of gets back to the bread and butter of our work at USTR, which is tackling unjustified trade barriers, whether that's related to new technologies or the myriad other barriers that we tackle day to day, day in and day out. Now, of course, before I close, I cannot forget to mention taxes. April 15th is right around the corner. But so while USTR, I am not a tax professional, as you know, but as USTR is working to implement the America First trade policy, there's also a government-wide effort to put in place policies to benefit the ag community. And this includes, of course, trade policy, energy policy, the pursuit of a deregulatory agenda, and also the extension of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And all of these are intended to reorient the economy in ways that will benefit the American farmer and really the country as a whole. So the Tax Reform and Reconciliation Act is intended to make permanent many of the beneficial tax provisions of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, including, for example, estate tax provisions, Section 199A pass-through deduction provisions, and all of the very beneficial aspects of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that are set to expire unless this new tax reform bill is passed. So President Trump is committed to the American farmer and to a government-wide effort to build a thriving production economy in all of these aspects of the economy. Now, as I mentioned, this has been a very dynamic 8 weeks, and this is really only the beginning of the implementation of the America First trade policy. Today, I don't have a lot of granular details that I am sure many of you are wondering about specific trading partners, specific negotiations, what specific priorities will be launched, on day one, on April 2nd, the day after our report is due. But that said, it really should be abundantly evident at this point. I know you're all following current events, and we're really embarking on this action-oriented, exciting reset that's geared toward ensuring that U.S. ag is treated fairly all over the world without exception. During the first Trump administration, the administration really overhauled our trading relationships with our 4 largest export markets. Of course, that was Canada and Mexico through the USMCA, with Japan through the U.S.-Japan Trade Agreement, with China through the Phase 1 agreement, and that captured nearly 50% of U.S. ag exports at the time. Currently, after the 4-year hiatus without market access negotiations, we're now embarking on an even more ambitious and fundamental reset to rebalance and restore fairness and reciprocity in our agricultural trade relationships, to aggressively enforce our trade laws, and to take prompt action in response to any unfair trade practices by other nations. Now, I'm also hearing from a lot of ag stakeholders that are very eager to expand market access in countries with market growth potential. So particularly Southeast Asia, India, North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa. And these are all regions we certainly recognize there's great growth potential, but they're also areas that will require intense work to address both prohibitive tariffs as well as systemic non-tariff barriers that have really stymied progress in previous attempts to open these markets in the past for U.S. ag. I can assure you, however, that we will be leaving no stone unturned. We're taking all of this feedback into account as we chart the path forward to ensure reciprocity, to ensure fairness, and to open these new market opportunities for U.S. ag. So President Trump has made it clear in his public statements, he and this administration are working every day to deliver for American farmers and ranchers, just as they work hard every day to deliver for the American public. So thank you again for your attention, and it's really a pleasure to be here with you today. So thank you.
For really laying out what we can expect under the new administration. The first question I had was, you mentioned the important work your team's doing at the WTO. This president has previously expressed a preference for bilateral trade discussions and negotiations over multilateral agreements. I was wondering, how do you see this administration engaging with the WTO and other multilateral institutions?
It's always good to start by sitting on the microphone. So I certainly recognize how important the WTO is for U.S. ag stakeholders. We continually hear from stakeholders who want to make sure the WTO remains viable. A number of stakeholders would like to see some litigation. I won't go into that now, but there's certainly one area I think we can all agree with is the WTO is in desperate need of reform. We do want to see a viable WTO that's relevant for the current issues that we're facing today. But I will say there is a steep hill for the WTO to climb in order to come back to being an organization of relevance. And I'll just give you an example. I mentioned we cover 2 committees. I would say the SPS committee is the bright spot. It's a committee where we build coalitions, we encourage countries to base their measures on science. It's really an active, thriving committee where we can get things done. That bright spot is a minuscule bright spot in a sea of other committees that are facing so many challenges. One committee that's really emblematic of the challenge is the Committee on Agriculture. Part of the challenge that we face in the Committee on Ag is, as a consensus organization, countries can limit the ability of progress. So, for example, the Committee on Ag has a negotiating mandate. There are countries that say, we would like to negotiate on domestic support and create additional rules. Not my domestic support. I would like to make rules for my neighbor's domestic support. And then the US position is we are willing and able to negotiate domestic support as long as that's balanced with market access negotiations. Because some WTO members have incredibly high bound tariff rates. Now, the countries with the high bound tariff rates are like, we very much like the status quo, thank you very much, but we're not negotiating market access. So this one committee has been paralyzed round and round and round for years with these conversations. And so I give that just as an example of the very, very deep challenges that the WTO is facing, and that USTR really needs to see what path forward could make the WTO viable. Will it mean more plurilateral negotiations? That's entirely possible. There are WTO members that are trying to block plurilateral negotiations. So we really have a rocky road ahead. We're not ready to abandon the WTO by any stretch, but really a lot of hard work needs to happen. And so far, we're not seeing signs from some WTO members that they're willing to make the changes necessary for a viable organization.
You also mentioned the importance of opening new markets, and USTR has already collected a long laundry list of trade barriers. Could you talk about the process for whittling down that list to determine which barriers need to be addressed and which markets might be candidates for market access negotiations?
Sure. I will say we currently are not actually whittling. We're building the laundry list and we're not narrowing down. So at this point, we're not saying, well, we're only going to tackle trade barriers above X billion dollars. We're really looking at a very simple level. Who's treating us fairly and who's treating us in a really lousy way? And that's really part of the, that's a very primitive way of saying it, but it really is looking at fairness and reciprocity. And it's, I think some stakeholders might see reciprocity and think we're only looking at numerical values of X percent of tariff on this commodity versus the US percent tariff on this commodity. It's much broader than that. We're not planning on lining up all of our HTS codes with all of our trading partners. It's more the overall fairness. What's the average applied rate for US agricultural goods into that country? What's our average applied rate? How can we really tackle some of the extremely unfair issues that we're facing and really not limiting to certain countries or certain issues?
The one other mechanism that's got a lot of interest in recent years has been sectoral-specific trade deals, and this came up in USTR Jameson Greer's confirmation hearing as well. Are there opportunities for the agriculture sector in these types of arrangements, and what makes them better suited for the modern trade environment as opposed to a traditional FTA?
I would say absolutely. There's opportunities for ag-specific negotiations. And the way we're looking at this now is very tailored to the particular trading partner. So we're taking a look at each trading partner across sectors, ag and non-ag, and IP, all of the issue areas that USTR covers. And then are there very, very specific ag issues that we need to address kind of in isolation? And can we identify leverage and an approach that would benefit US ag? Or do we need a broader negotiation? With some trading partners, there's myriad things that we might want to tackle as a whole. And in that case, it might be a broader negotiation, not necessarily like a normal FTA that a lot of stakeholders are most familiar with. If we were to decide an FTA type agreement was appropriate, of course, we would need to consult with Congress. We don't have trade promotion authority. We would be, of course, consulting with stakeholders before launching any of these varieties of negotiations. But I will say with this administration, there's a focus on how can we do things differently, and it doesn't have to look the same as what everyone's used to, and how do we get tangible progress? Like I mentioned, action-oriented and how to make progress that you can see immediately is really the emphasis at this point. And so that's why we're taking a look at, should it be a sectoral agreement? Should it be a very narrow agreement to resolve a particular issue? Or do we want to bring other sectors in as well?
I know you mentioned that you're... a quick microphone change. I know you mentioned that you're not able to speak about specifics from April 2nd, but we're also expecting some sort of reciprocal tariff that's applied, that reflects the applied average tariff rate on US ag. Could you speak more generally about how you envision working bilaterally with trading partners after April 2nd, and what that might look like given the tariff that's been applied?
Sure, and I will say we're not limited to just April 2nd, because as I mentioned, I was just in Manila last week working with our Philippine colleagues to address really a couple of unfair trade practices that it was important to go there to signal in person how serious this administration takes unfair trade practices and how important it is to address these in a prompt manner. So I do anticipate we will have a lot of bilateral discussions. We're already having many, many bilateral discussions with countries that are taking a look at the America First trade policy, taking a look at all of the executive orders, thinking, what is this going to mean for us, and seeing how they can work with USTR. So I would say everything taking place right now is creating the leverage that we need to really have some serious conversations, including with very strong allies, trading partners that we have great relationships with, trading partners where we have some challenges. Across the board, we're having the conversation on how do we move forward in a way that's going to be beneficial, that's going to reset our relationship, and it can be beneficial in both directions. It is an effort to build stronger relationships that don't disadvantage U.S. agriculture.
And in that vein, we've already seen an announcement that the US will begin work on some form of economic arrangement or trade pact with the UK. These talks began under Trump's first administration. And to what extent can you build on those talks already? I know we've got a new government in the UK under the Labour government, but can you revive those, or is it really like starting from scratch all over again?
That's a great question. When we launched the US-UK FTA negotiations in 2020, I was the lead on the SPS side. And I will say, before we even launched that FTA, immediately after the Brexit vote, USTR and our UK colleagues created a US-UK Trade and Investment Working Group. We met quarterly to discuss every issue affecting agriculture. And on the US side, we were very much encouraging the UK to pursue regulatory autonomy and to de-link their regulatory system from the EU system in a way that would open opportunities for UK farmers to pursue, innovative products that are not allowed in the EU, and also to build a stronger trade relationship between the United States and the UK. So those conversations right after Brexit were so useful and informative, so that by the time we launched the FTA negotiations, we already really knew our counterparts really well, and they knew us, they knew where we were coming from, they knew what we were looking for. However, when we launched that FTA negotiation, it was directly after the UK exited the EU. So their regulatory systems were still being stood up. They really were in a difficult place to try to negotiate very specific commitments. And so we ran out of time and didn't finish the FTA in the first Trump administration. I will say a lot of water has gone under the bridge between 2020 and 2025. So the UK has entered into new trade agreements with their partners. We're in a different place than we were back then as well. And so it's unclear what the actual negotiation will look like with the UK. But we wouldn't be starting from where we left off in many ways. I will say, if we were to enter into an ag negotiation with the UK's average tariff on ag products is almost twice the average ag tariff that we have in the United States. So that would certainly be something I would be interested in pursuing, some rebalancing there. And there's a number of SPS and non-tariff barriers that we really would be looking at resolving, whether it's beef, poultry. There's a number of long-standing SPS barriers that we really would want to address with the UK if given the chance. So still not determined how that negotiation is going to look, but we certainly have ideas in mind if we did pursue an ag agreement with the UK.
Last question, because we're right up against it, but I did want to acknowledge the breakneck speed that trade policy has been rolled out under this administration. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the USTR is slightly smaller than it has been in recent years. How is that combining with the pace of policy making right now, and how are the staff responding, and what's the morale like there?
That's really an excellent question. Thank you for that question. I will say you're right. The staff is smaller. So at the end of the Trump administration, the first Trump administration, we had 14 people in the ag office, and now we have 10. So that's a pretty dramatic change there. And some of our staff were hired during the Biden administration, and so they have not really experienced the intensity that we're experiencing now. And I kind of look at it as I have this excellent staff, and they're like Olympic athletes, but Olympic athletes who weren't able to really train and compete for a number of years. So the muscle memory is there, the energy is there, but they really need to rebuild the stamina and get used to this new intensity that we're facing on a daily basis. And I'll just give you a quick example. We have one new staff member who his portfolio was really in the spotlight a couple of weeks ago. And, there were these immediate, I need this analysis in an hour, and all of these requests coming in from the White House. And then he got pulled into a meeting in the Situation Room, and it was just an insane day. And he stopped by my office. It was probably like 6:30 p.m. And he came in, he said, "This was so cool." Like, he was like so energized by the intensity. And I feel like a lot of the staff feel like their skills and expertise is really being used and tested, and it's really energizing. I think on the flip side, I'm very cognizant I don't want people to be burnt out. We have been kind of on this 24/7, round-the-clock taskers coming in, and so hopefully we will be able to hire more people. But in the meantime, I would say at this moment, there's such energy and enthusiasm, and staff really feel like they're doing something that matters. So it's a good time to be at USTR.
Well, we'll let you get back to training your Olympic athletes, and thank you so much for joining us today, Julie. This has been a pleasure.